All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for week 3 of our Winter Nature Challenge, this wonderful collaboration between the North-South Rivers Watershed Association, Mass Audubon, and the South Shore Natural Science Center. So thanks for joining. My name is Brian Taylor, and I am the educator with the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. We have over 400 people that have registered to participate in this program. So it's great to hear the interest is there for folks to be engaged in nature this winter. There's still plenty of things to do out there, even when it's chilly. So it's great to have such wonderful participation. Just before we begin, the NSRWA is excited to be continuing to offer programs throughout the winter, and as well into spring. There is actually a program coming up which registration will begin tomorrow, actually, for a winter holiday adventures, a February vacation, the week of February 16th through the 19th, a 4-day half-day outdoor program. So if you're interested in that, more information will be on our website tomorrow. If you're looking for something for your youth ages 9 to 12, for something for them to do, check that out and see if that might be something that you and them would be interested in. So with that, definitely more programs to come through the NSRWA. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Doug Lowry with Mass Audubon.
Thanks, Brian. Tonight's pretty exciting. You've over the years supported all 3 organizations, and one of the things that's amazing about our community is that it's a coastal community, and a lot goes on in a coastal community, and to have the 3 organizations there to help us along with being stewards of the coastal communities is a treat, and we are proud to be part of the trifecta of organizations, and really excited about tonight's program. I'm not going to introduce her for sure, but I just want to throw out a shout out. Is Dr. Sara Grady is just the perfect person to be tonight's speaker. She has done a tremendous amount over her years at the Watershed Association to promote real science, to back decisions by real science. And so we're excited that she has been a part of this series tonight. I'd like to thank our corporate sponsors. They've been here for years. Clean Harbors, very generous every year. And then a number of the local mass cultural councils also contribute. Yeah, and as far as what's going on at Mass Audubon, we're excited about some changes to kind of our organization these days. We are now a region or a hub, so our influence is expanded over a few other communities. So we look forward to what that brings us. Just a heads up, this Friday will be our 3rd chapter in our Adventures in the Wildest Places, where Brett Friedman is going to talk about sailing in Baja California Sur. And it's kind of fun. Brett is a big thinker. One of the things on his life list is to sail across at least the Atlantic. And he realized that there was a few things in the way of that. One, he doesn't know how to sail. And 2, it was kind of a big jump to go, to shoot for that. So in the meantime, he's learned how to sail and is getting better and better. And this is his story of his adventures on how that all is going to play out. So we welcome you to join us this noon. You can register on our website. And now I'd like to hand it over to Chris Jacobs, who is our host over the years, and whether we're in that wonderful room of the science centers or online, we're grateful for her hosting and her ability to put all this together, as well as Brian.
Thanks, Doug. We're excited to be here for our third week. It's been great and a lot of fun as well. So I'm just going to remind everyone that we are finishing up our Corn Festival Reimagined. So we have taken Corn Festival and we've gone virtual. This Saturday, we have Big Ryan's Tall Tales. He's always fun at 10 a.m. And then the Science of Spinning Yarn is on Sunday at 1 p.m. And that's with Melissa Kurkowski. And she's an amazing educator and has such an amazing passion. Also, we do have February Vacation Week programming as well for grades K through 5. And then our summer Nature Adventures Camp will open in mid-February for registration. So keep an eye out for that. And I'll put the link to register for these 2 virtual programs in the chat feature if anyone wants to register for those free programs sponsored by the Massachusetts Cultural Council. I'm gonna just touch upon this week's challenge winner. We have the McSherry family, and this is our friend Austin here, and he is an amazing wanderer. Lots of questions, but what I love about this family is that their challenge for themselves is to log 1,000 hours outside in 2021. And so far they have logged 50 hours, which is amazing. So 50 hours in the month of January already. So kudos to them. So I'm gonna pass it over to Brian now.
Great, thanks, Chris. So throughout this program, I in the chat bar will be putting some reminders for how you can donate. You can, I will put the link in the chat function, as well as you could also text to that number right there, which I will also include in the chat. So your support for programs like this one for all 3 organizations would be greatly appreciated. So the handle is with the NSRWA. However, any donations that you make will be split up between the 3 organizations to continue offering programs like this, as well as programs in the future. So so thank you very much for participating. And any of your support would be greatly appreciated. So so thank you for that. So without further ado, I think a great introduction was already made on behalf of Dr. Sara Grady, but definitely being able to work with her and learn from her has just been invaluable to me, as I have moved to the South Shore and have begun to delve into the world of ecology. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce NSRWA and Mass Bay's Regional Partnership Ecologist, Dr. Sara Grady.
All right, thank you, Brian and Chris and Doug, for that wonderful introduction. I'm really glad to be presenting to you tonight. So let me just get my presentation going for you here. All right, so tonight we are going to be talking about winter beachcombing. I am the watershed ecologist for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, and I'm also the South Shore Regional Coordinator for the Massachusetts Bays National Estuary Partnership. And I've been working for both organizations now for almost 16 years. And I've been beachcombing on the South Shore since I was a baby. So that's now over 40 years. So hopefully I can impart to you some of the knowledge that I've picked up over those decades. So we've all been to the beach in the summer. And I have to say, I will be putting plenty of pictures of my adorable children in this presentation. This is my son when he was a little bit younger. We've all been to the beach in the summer. You know, you get to have bare feet, you get to run around in the water, you know, hang out on the sand. But have you been to the beach in the winter? I will let you know that there are still plenty of great things to find, even if you're there in the winter. You just have to prepare a little bit differently. So what makes the beach different in the winter? Well, first of all, there are differences in temperature. We all know that it's cold in the winter and it's warm in the summer. So this graph shows in the light colors, those are the average air temperature each month, as well as the average max and min temperature. And the darker line is the water temperature. So if you've been swimming around here in the summer, you know that our water temperatures are colder than the air temperature in the summer. But did you know that the water temperature is warmer than the air in the winter? The other thing is that there's a lag in when the water temperature hits its high and low. So whereas we have our warmest air in the July, we have our warmest water in August, and we have our coldest air in January, but our coldest water in February. And both that reduced range in temperature change, as well as that lag, means that in the winter, the water actually is a safer place for many of the marine organisms. The air is really kind of dangerous because that's how those animals would perhaps freeze. And something that really contributes to that as well is how much windier it is in the winter. So when the wind is blowing across the beach, you definitely know it in the winter. And that wind not only can do things like dry out the organisms living on the rocks and between the rocks, it also plays a big part in moving sand along the beach in the winter. So you'll often see that there's sand blowing along the beach. Finally, sometimes we even get ice. Believe it or not, even though it's salt water, sometimes the ocean does get cold enough to freeze. Those of you who are really familiar with the area, or even semi-familiar with the area, probably can recognize where this was taken. But this is on the North River. And this was a particularly cold winter when everything was kind of iced over. But you'll see that even though the marsh has ice on it, that the river itself is pretty unfrozen. And that's because the salt is helping keep that river liquid, as well as the movement of the water itself. So when we go to the beach in the summer, we like to have a nice sandy beach, and often we do find that nice sandy beach. But in the winter, we get much more storm energy. And the movement of waves in the winter pulls sand away from the beach where we are, between the high tide line and the low tide line, and above that as well, and usually forms a sandbar offshore. So when you go to the beach and you notice that the beach is rockier, it's not that those rocks just showed up. Those have been underneath the sand all summer, and then the sand has been pulled out offshore. And you can usually see that sandbar as a lighter patch if you are able to look at the water with polarized sunglasses. And through the spring, that sand is going to roll back on shore. Along places like Wrexham Beach, you have a lot of different coastal processes going on to move that sand. So what I just talked about was something called cross-shore sediment transport, where that sand is moving out to sea and then coming back in perpendicular to the shoreline. But we also have movement of sediment from the north to the south generally, which is longshore sediment transport. We have what's called aeolian transport. So that's that wind that we talked about, blowing the sand along the beach. And then where we have something like a river or a bay, so in this case, it's the South River at Wrexham, or it could also be Duxbury Bay if you're at Duxbury Beach, we get barrier beach overwash. Storms play a big part in changing our beaches in the winter, particularly when we have nor'easters. So this is from 2018 when we had all of those big storms. And you can see that not only has sand washed up onto the street, but that actually some pretty large rocks have too. So waves have a lot of power and they're doing a lot to shape the beach. So that factors in to what you might find on the beach, what the beach might look like, because those waves move a lot of different things. And one of the things that waves can move is something called wrack. So when you go to the beach and you walk along the beach, there's usually a line of tangled up, what looks like tangled up sticks and rockweed and all sorts of things at the high tide line, and that is the Wrack Line. We have 2 high tides a day, and during the new and full moons, we have our spring high tides. So those are higher high tides. When we have a first quarter or third quarter moon, then we have what are called neap tides. So the high tide is lower and the low tide is higher. And so if you go to the beach, you might see multiple rack lines because you might have one that's sort of at mean high water, so the roughly average high water. There might be another rack line at mean higher high water where we're getting those spring tides pushing things up just a little bit further. And then even higher up, you might actually find storm high tide rack lines. And depending on the energy of the waves, you would see different things perhaps in those rack lines. So I mentioned that there's all these different things that are happening in winter that can affect what we see on the beach. And the first thing I'm going to talk about are things that are alive, because that's often one of the most exciting things to try to find when you go beachcombing is something that's alive, animals and things like that. So many animals that are living on the beach or near the beach or in the ocean have adaptations to surviving through the winter. Some of them slow down their metabolism. So when it's a cold-blooded animal, often they will just kind of bury themselves and wait until the water warms up. Some of them have antifreeze proteins that keep their tissue from turning into ice. And that's particularly helpful for things that live in the intertidal where they're exposed to the air. Some animals close up to protect from drying. Both barnacles and snails have shells that have something called an operculum, which is a hard, sort of a hard door that allows them to keep their actual bodies wet inside those shells. And then you have things that like warm-blooded birds and mammals that have insulation that protects them from the cold. So birds have feathers and waterproofing that keep air close to their skin. And then mammals will often have fat and fur to keep them warm. There's also the advantage that some animals can move to stay in the water, which, as you remember, is warmer than the air. So I'm going to start with the intertidal, which is the place where we really like to go beachcombing because there's always kind of interesting things to see. I will tell you that often you will not see as much in the winter as you see in the summer when you flip over rocks. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of the crabs not really being there. They slow down, they hide, but there are plenty of other things that are there that you can see. So in the splash zone, which really doesn't get too wet even at high tide, you'll still be able to find periwinkles walking around or scooting around or sliming around, however you want to think about how a periwinkle moves. And you'll see dark patches, which are actually a kind of algae, a blue-green algae. And then when you move into the upper intertidal, that's what we call the green zone. we call it the green zone because the most common algae there are green algae, the sea lettuces, the ulva, and that's where you'll find things like acorn barnacles and dog whelks, which are a predatory snail, and you might even get lucky and see a sea urchin. As you go more into the intertidal, that's where you're going to be in what we call the brown zone, and that is dominated by rockweed, which is fucus, as well as knotted wrack. You'll find blue mussels there, and that's where you would also see sea stars and limpets. And finally, the red zone, you're really not going to see unless it is one of those spring low tides where the tide is out especially far. And that's called the red zone because it's dominated by Irish moss. And that is kind of getting into the water quite a bit. So it's not necessarily the safest place to try to go in the winter, but there are some pretty cool forms of algae there. The Irish moss, as well as coralline algae, which is a red algae that integrates calcium into itself, so it's kind of crispy. So those are kind of the invertebrates and the algae. There are also, of course, plenty of birds to see, and I'm gonna mini plug for Doug's bird watching talk next week. I'm not a professional birder, or I'm very, very, very amateur. So what I will tell you is that I see gulls, and I see my favorite sea ducks. The eider, the common eider, is one of my favorites. That's it right there. There are cormorants, and we also in our area get the return of the snowy owls in certain places, but your likelihood of seeing those is not very high, and we do recommend that you keep your distance, because there have been some issues with overcrowding in some of the places where the owls have shown up. You could also see marine mammals. Our two most common seals are gray seals and harbor seals. The harbor seal has more of a dog-like face, shorter, some might say cuter. And then gray seals have a longer nose. Some people say that they have kind of a horse-like face. We also will get Arctic seal species that come to our area, like harp seals and hooded seals and ringed seals. But you will often see at least harbor seals hauled out on rocks, and you'll see them often on the floats too, in the North River, if you're going to the North River. So one issue that does occur in the winter are strandings. In most cases, it's totally normal for seals to be hauled out. They are usually okay. If you're beachcombing and you see a seal that appears to be injured, you might want to take note of that. Just remember that you have to stay 500 feet away from marine mammals. Obviously, if you see a dolphin or a whale or a sea turtle on the beach, that is an animal that would be in need of help. We have issues, not so much on our beaches, but there are certainly issues on Cape Cod with sea turtles being cold shocked and washing up on the beach or getting stuck on the beach. And those need to be rescued. So if you are in Plymouth, south to Rhode Island, including Cape Cod, you're going to want to call the International Fund for Animal Welfare hotline. If you're in Plymouth north to the New Hampshire border, you would want to call the New England Aquarium hotline. And although the National Marine Life Center in Buzzards Bay is sort of a hospital for these species, the turtles and the stranded seals, they do not have a beach rescue program themselves. So either call IFA or the New England Aquarium, according to where you are geographically. So those were the things that you might see that are alive, but there are also some really great things to find that are non-living. Beachcombing in the winter is a great time to find shells, particularly because that sand is kind of offshore. So things are a little bit more exposed. So you could find that's some tumbled shells like the one on the left there. That's a piece of quahog that has been tumbled in the surf, and they have that beautiful purple color on the inside. You could also find these big surf clam shells. Surf clams live in the sand offshore. So when we have these winter storms, it digs those clams up and then they wash up on shore. So those are always a lot of fun to find. There's always cool rocks to find. So many different colors and shapes. There's also quite a lot of seaglass in the winter. Again, because you have this this sorted sediment on the beach and this tumbling action going on. Where I find seaglass most often is in the part of the beach where the sand transitions to rocks, so where it's almost like a large gravel size. My daughter says that I have kind of an eye for seaglass. I tend to be able to spot it really easily. So hopefully if you go beachcombing, you'll find yourself a piece or two as well, because that's a lot of fun. And of course, there's all sorts of other random stuff you can find, because when you go to the beach, you never know what you'll find. You might find a fish skeleton, or you might find a piece of coal. There's actually quite a lot of coal that has washed up on our beaches. And that is because it has fallen off of barges. So here's just sort of two different random beachcombing collections that I found that I had pictures of in my photos. So on the left-hand side was one little trip, and have a piece of a rock crab claw. There's a limpet shell. There's a couple of cool colored rocks, and a piece of sea glass. And on the right-hand side, another piece of sea glass, more rocks. I think some of those were, handed to me by a child. There's a dog whelk shell that has been tumbled a little bit. And then this is actually a root and rhizome from the common reed from Phragmites. That's kind of an interesting find. I actually have this thing sitting in my car. One thing you also might see, because you've got waves tossing and wind blowing, is foam. And I want to assure you that it is totally normal to see foam on the beach. It is not soap, it is not pollution, it is just the tossing of the water. Whenever I see this, it always reminds me of this poem, Sea Fever, by John Masefield, which just talks about the windy day with the white clouds flying, the flung spray and the blown spume, and the seagulls crying. That foam is totally normal. However, something that is not something that we normally see but doesn't belong on the beach is marine debris. And again, storms will bring in marine debris, but it's also there, unfortunately, all the time on our beaches. So Coast Sweep, which organizes beach cleanups, has some of these ranked lists. And this was the most recent one that I could find from 2019. I think they did not do a cleanup in 2020. But things like cigarette butts and plastic pieces and food wrappers, lots of different forms of plastic, which does not break down. It just gets smaller and smaller. And I'm sure maybe you've heard of the microplastics problem, where these pieces get small enough to actually be ingested by different marine animals. And on the other end of the size spectrum, you will also see derelict fishing gear on the beach, especially after a big storm. So you'll find pieces of lobster trap, you'll find buoys, and again, and rope, lots of rope. So that's another form of marine debris, and something that doesn't belong on our beaches. So next, how does one prepare for their winter beachcombing trip? Well, you would probably want to bring a net, because reaching down into the cold water may not be something that you want to do. You would probably want to wear some good boots that will keep your feet warm and dry, and make sure that they have a good tread on them, and if you're going to be walking on anything that could be slippery. You might want to bring your trash bag for picking up that marine debris. And you might want to bring a bucket for temporarily collecting things. Please don't just put things in a bucket and let them die, which actually is more of a problem in the summer when the water heats up and the oxygen goes out of the water. But we don't advise that you try to take any of your living creatures home with you in a bucket. It's winter. So one of your biggest concerns is going to be the cold. Make sure that you are warm, and make sure that you stay dry. When you get wet, that's going to make you get a lot colder a lot faster. So make sure that your boots are waterproof. Make sure that you're not going to get wet while you're out there. Cotton is once it gets wet, does not dry very well, and it's a great way to get cold real fast. So wool is really recommended. You shouldn't be close enough to deep water that you will actually be falling into the water, I hope. But just remember that cold water can hurt you very quickly. You get shocked when you fall into cold water. So please, please, please be safe. And to that point, always be aware of falling. You may not be quite as nimble as this little creature. Certainly things will be wet. They may be slimy due to algae. Rocks can be unstable and unbalanced when you step on them. So always really check your footing as you move, and move slowly. And you're going to be wearing shoes if you're on the rocks. The barnacles are kind of your friends. They're going to help you grip onto those rocks. I would much rather step on a patch of barnacles than step on a patch of algae, for sure. And always keep your eyes to the ocean. You want to make sure that you're not going to get hit by a wave that's going to get you wet and make you cold. So you won't be in in the waves as much as this, but you never know when a slightly larger wave might come and get you wetter than you're planning on getting. And remember also that, like I said, there are 2 high tides each day. And if you're way out on the rocks at low tide and the tide starts to come in, make sure you're able to get in again, because you do not want to get wet in the winter. This just shows the same 2 rocks at high tide and low tide. And just for neat regional knowledge, this is at Wrexham Beach, and the The rock with the red arrow is called haystack. The rock with the orange arrow is called beetle. And the one that doesn't have an arrow that's more toward the front is called Little America. So where can you go to go beachcombing? Well, most town beaches have free parking in the winter. Duxbury Beach checks stickers all year round. So it is not free parking. But there are town beaches in pretty much all of the towns along the coast where you should be able to park and go look for things. Town conservation land is another great way to get to the coast. Center Hill Preserve in Plymouth is actually a really great place to go beachcombing. It's off of 3A between Cedarville and Manomet. And state parks and beaches are also a great place to go. So Nantasket up in Hull, Ellisville Harbor State Park, which is down in Plymouth, and often is a great place to go see seals, and Scusset Beach, which is down in Sagamore. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Here I am beachcombing at 3 years old. So yeah, so I can't wait to answer your questions now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. So yeah, we'll open it up for if anyone has any questions, feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll be happy to field those as they come in.
Brian and Sarah, we did have a question earlier, and it was why does the sand, or how does the sand establish itself after the winter storms? I mean, why is there sand? How does it get up onto the beach again after winter storms?
Yeah, so the more gentle rolling waves that we have in late spring and into the summer are what moves that sand. So the violent waves tend to sort of pull sand back, but when you have sort of these gently crashing waves, they tend to push sand forward.
Sarah, my question came in, where and when can you see horseshoe crabs?
You are asking the right person.
Where and when? All right. You can see horseshoe crabs in slightly muddier, less wavy locations. So around here, Duxbury Bay is a fantastic place to see them. You can also see them down off in Plymouth and Kingston Bays as well. And you would see them in May and June predominantly, although they are still sort of hanging around through July and August. But you'll see them closest to the beach in May and June because that's when they're coming up to spawn. And we have spawning surveys that we do. So if you ever want to see them, we might be having some horseshoe crab events if COVID allows. COVID willing, we'll be having horseshoe crab events.
Sarah, it looks like there's a couple more questions here, but I just wanted to throw this out. So the west side of Powder Point Bridge, there's a small gravel parking lot at Duxbury Beach that actually is public, and you don't need a permit to park on that. It means you have to walk across the Powder Point Bridge to access the beach, but that is open to the public. You almost guaranteed a spot there in the winter.
Yeah.
Summer, you got to go
Right.
real early. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if people don't mind the walk, that is one way to do it.
I would choose a day that's not too windy
Yes.
for that walk across the bridge.
Sarah, I've got another one here. Someone found what looked like to be a shark teeth on Nantasket Beach in Hull. Could that have been what they have found, or are there other types of teeth that could wash up on the beaches around here?
It could have been shark teeth. Shark teeth are pretty distinctive in that they're sort of separate. Many of the other fish that live around here have sort of these plates or rows of teeth that are not quite as distinct or fall out as often. So yeah, it could have been a shark tooth. And there's actually, I can't remember the resource right now, but there's actually a really great shark tooth identification website. So you can double check. I can't think of what it is right now though, but you know, Google.
There's always Google. What about wildlife, good places for wildlife photography? I know that you mentioned a few, but I think someone may have joined a little bit late. Just maybe a couple quick wildlife spots for photography.
Right. So if you like to see seals at the ocean, Ellisville Harbor State Park is really great for seals. And you know, you'll see many of the shorebirds all along the coast. So almost any spot you pick would be good for that. I know actually I see a lot of the sea ducks down at the Cape Cod Canal. It's just filled with eiders. So that's a spot to see those. Yeah, and then places like Peggotty Beach or Wrexham Beach are great too.
It's like more of a geography question here, but how did Egypt Beach come to be? What is the natural history of that collection?
Oh my gosh. Egypt Beach in particular?
Yep. I'm assuming it's a similar process to also Peggotty as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are kind of these pocket beaches between the headlands. So generally, the way that our beaches have formed around here is we have these sort of glacial headlands that erode and feed beaches between them with sand. So that's where a lot of our beaches have come from.
Yeah, I've always I've heard many different things about the formation of sand. The beaches around here, what would be the majority of the derivative of the type of sand that we have here? Like, what's the biggest contribution of the sand on our South Shore beaches?
Glacial deposited sand. So, you know, it's been ground down by the glaciers, you know, and was deposited when they retreated.
Okay, and about how many granules of sand do we have around here? Just kidding.
It's funny that you asked. That's a really good question, because I actually I looked that up the other day. Because when I was looking at the giant sand pile at the Hanover Mall, and my daughter asked me how many grains of sand were in it. The answer is trillions.
It's got to be a way to extrapolate.
Yeah, by volume.
Times that. Yeah. Good raffle question there. All right, so looks like that might be all the questions that we have. So as the Winter Nature Challenge has progressed, we have had a challenge for every week that corresponds to each week's particular subject of discussion. And of course, this week is no exception to that. So to participate in the challenge, all you have to do is explore a beach and find these three things. One thing that is living, one thing that is non-living, not dead.
Still cool.
Yeah, there's non-living, yeah. And one thing that doesn't belong. So one living thing, one non-living thing, and one thing that doesn't belong. So non-living, of course, does not mean dead. It is, as I said, the criteria is it has to be cool. All right. And then feel free to either post on NSRWA's social media, either our Facebook page, our Instagram, or our Twitter at NSRWA, or you can email it to me if you are like me and not very social media savvy. Just go ahead and send it to brian@nsrwa.org. And then we will, of course, announce a winner next week. We'd love to see pictures too. And always tag, anytime you post, tag Winter Nature Challenge 2021. So once again, thank you all very much for participating. Before I forget, we are having 2 guided beachcombing walks that will discuss very similar things that Sarah talked about. One of which is with the North-South Rivers. Myself and Sarah will be there. That is Sunday, January 31st at 9 a.m. Once upon registration, you will be sent the link of where to meet and all that. And then another one is with South Shore Natural Science Center. Chris Jacobs will be leading that one. That is Tuesday, February 2nd at 10 a.m. So you will all be sent an email just in about 5 minutes with a recap of the challenge as well as links to both of these events. So it's $10 for single tickets or $20 for a group tickets up to 4 individuals. So we have limited spots. We have these capped at just around 10 people. So very small groups. And so it'll be a really fun and cool experience. So if you're interested, you will be getting links to both of these. These are only being offered exclusively to people who registered for this event. So,
Brian, I just want to do a shout out to Nancy Larson. And this is one of her photos on the right from this week's challenge. She was the runner up, and this is actually from Ellisville State Park, which Sarah has mentioned a couple of times. And one of the challenges this past week was to visit somewhere or explore somewhere that you've never been before. And she had never been to Ellisville. And she got these really great pictures.
Awesome. Sarah, really quick, what is the most interesting thing you've seen in your work?
Oh my gosh. The most interesting thing I've seen in my work. On the spot there. Yes, okay, no, I will tell you. The most interesting thing that I've seen in my work was when I was doing some marine invertebrate sampling up in Cohasset, and I found a nudibranch. So that is, like a snail without a shell, like a sea slug. And it's called Elysia chlorotica, and it's bright green, and it incorporates chloroplasts from algae into its tissue. So it's a photosynthetic sea slug.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's probably the coolest, I think.
And of course, we'll find one of those at the.
Are you promising that, Brian?
Awesome. I'm going to. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. Once again, it's always informative and really fun to listen and learn. So thank you very much. So I'm going to, at this point, pass it over to. Unless Sarah, do you have any final words for us before we talk about next week and sign off?
I hope that it's not quite as windy and cold this weekend as it was last weekend. Because, yeah. And I hope to see many of you on the beach with me on Saturday or Sunday, sorry.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. If you do register and if the weather is pretty inclement, we will do the best we can to reschedule. Of course, if we can't, we'll refund the tickets. So don't worry. If you're interested, definitely register, and we'll make sure that we get out there and find some cool stuff at some point if we can't this Sunday. So Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it. Once again, I'm going to, at this point, hand it over back to Doug Lowry to talk about next week's discussion.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, we will spend some time talking about bird watching or birding, which has been one of the fastest growing, I guess you could call it a hobby or a way to get out into nature on a regular basis. It's an amazingly inexpensive thing to do. And birds are always around us and always an indication of what's happening in the bigger picture. And so winter is no exception. We have both some resident birds that we see here all year round, in addition to some northern migrants that come down and use our area. And so we'll talk about what you might see, some of the best places to find birds in the watershed, and including, we'll talk about Sarah's common eider. And I'll try to gear it so that folks are prepared to go out with family members, young and old, to make a go of it. Yeah, so it's an introduction to what could be a lifelong hobby or interest. Love to have folks join us.
Awesome. And with that, I think we're going to sign off. Anything else? Brian, Doug, Sarah? Wonderful. Thank you again for joining us. As Brian mentioned, you will be receiving an email shortly with the challenges and the links to this coming week's walks. And then within a couple of days, Brian usually sends out the recording. So thank you for doing that as well, Brian. And have a great night, and we will see you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.